Electricity Minister Siphamandla Goge has announced a raft of interventions to ease blackouts. Eskom is implementing Stage 3 blackouts at this time, which will escalate to Stage 4 from 4 p.m. Goge has been speaking at the party's NEC meeting in Boksburg.
The NEC sees this as an economic emergency that requires extraordinary measures for us to be able to address the challenges of load shedding. And one of the issues that the NEC raised was increased levels of sabotage on the infrastructure. Of course, it's about logistics infrastructure, water infrastructure, but in this instance also about the electricity infrastructure. You saw the manifestations of these acts of sabotage most recently now in Tshwane, when our pylons were under attack, they collapsed, and major parts of Tshwane, Pretoria East, were without electricity for a considerable period of time.
The Democratic Alliance in Gauteng says Soweto residents need to work with police to bring perpetrators of crime to book. The party's Salim Semang visited the families of the children who were killed and mutilated in Rockville and White City this past week and says the criminals who did the crimes do not deserve any mercy.
These children deserve, the Zulu and the Ndlovu family deserve justice. The children's death should never be in vain. This is something that I think there's the investigation that needs to take place. We are told that there's another child that is missing also now that still not been accounted for. I think this is something that needs to be looked at. We want to then ensure that from a police perspective that something is being done, that is not just another case that gets put into the backlog of cases that are there, but there needs to be justice around the death of these children. I'm putting myself in the shoes of the parents, because I have a child that is of a similar age, and I'm asking myself, what would be said. I don't think there's anything that can be said to console the families at this point in time, but we now need to do something as a community. I'm sure somebody somewhere has seen something. Let's work with the police. Let's find a way in which we'll be able to then bring the perpetrators of this crime, really in a court of law, and make sure that they actually send to justice. They don't deserve actually any mercy whatsoever.
Back to one of our top stories now. The electricity crisis has been dominating discussions on the second day of the African National Congress's National Executive Committee meeting out in Boksburg. For most of this week, we've been subjected to stages 5 and stage 6 blackouts, and the solution hasn't been forthcoming. Reporter Siphamandla Goge has been tracking developments at the NEC for us, and he joins us now live. Siphamandla, we've been told to prepare for at least 2 years of load shedding. That's what we've been hearing time and time again over the last while. But what has the electricity minister there said about ending it potentially by the end of this year?
Well, he has reiterated that it's not going to happen by the end of this year. The Secretary General of the governing African National Congress, Mr. Fikile April Mbalula, would have wanted that to be wrapped up by the end of this year. When he had a media briefing at Luthuli House, I think about a month or two ago, he said the wishes and desires of the governing African National Congress would be to end load shedding by the end of the year. Of course, we know now that President Ramaphosa has appointed electricity minister, and that is Dr. Kgotsientsho Ramokgopa, who's been visiting a number of power plants from Eskom, trying to assess the situation and to get the first-hand information and picture of what is happening with this never-ending crisis, which by now should have been dealt with once and for all. But as we speak, Electricity Minister, who's the member of the National Executive Committee of the ANC, who sits in the Economic Transformation Subcommittee of the governing party, made his presentation to the National Executive Committee of the ANC, which is the highest decision-making body in between conferences. Before presenting to the NEC yesterday, he presented to the National Working Committee of the ANC, which is a structure responsible for the day-to-day running of the ANC, because this electricity crisis has been embarrassing the governing party for years now. They are failing to decisively deal with the issue of load shedding. Let's take a listen to what the minister said regarding a possibility of load shedding ending by this year, basically dashing those hopes and doing away with those hopes and dreams that by the end of the year load shedding will be over. Please take a listen to him.
I would want to sit here and say to the country that load shedding will end tomorrow. Unfortunately, it's not possible. And it's also not technically possible for us to end load shedding by the end of the calendar year 2023. So, and that's why we are at pains to illustrate the kind of steps that we are taking. If you like, the winter period now and the next 6 months, and the 6 months going into 18 months. So the long and short of it is that no, load shedding will still be with us even by the end of this calendar year. But we'll do everything possible to ensure that its intensity is not as severe so that we get the South African economy going.
Siphamandla, with load shedding being implemented every day, we can't help but notice that winter is indeed coming. What is the outlook like with regards to power provision?
One depressing word for that question, bleak. And that's what the electricity minister said to us when we asked him about it. He said it does not look good. There is no guarantee that there will not be any higher stages of load shedding, even though ESCOM together with the government are trying hard to ensure that there will be no higher levels or stages of load shedding. But there is no guarantee really. It will depend on how things move as we edge closer to winter. Simply put, no one knows what will happen, but except to say load shedding will be with us in winter, and it's about to get worse if it's not dealt with decisively. Please take a listen to the minister.
If you look at the modeling, ESCOM says they can, the unplanned capability loss factor, essentially what it says, what we're going to lose as a result of the plant tripping. The best case scenario is 15,000 megawatts. The worst case scenario is 18,000 megawatts. And if you go to 18,000 megawatts, then you are beyond the stage 6 load shedding. So that's why we're saying we want to work with them to keep to the best case scenario. If we trip, I'm the first one to say to the public that now it's getting worse and worse. But yes, the outlook is bleak, and that's why we need to put these measures in place, support ESCOM, get the CEO in place, management stability, get these things running so that we are able to provide relief to the South African economy. Its lives, its jobs, it's just hunger, and you can see there's despondency. People are frustrated. I mean, they hardly believe what we are saying, and we accept that. Our credibility will be restored in our ability to switch on the lights, and that's the point we're making.
And now, Siphamandla, just in closing, any word from the ANC on how the electricity crisis is affecting the economy right now? We know that's just as bleak. And of course, we're talking about what impact it's had on the revision of a possible growth outlook, or no growth at all, in a matter of speaking.
The IMF has revised South Africa's growth outlook to 0.1%, which is not looking good. And one of the main factors for that decision to revise the country's growth outlook is the energy crisis. Nothing else but the energy crisis, or at least it's the main factor. That is what was cited as one of the leading factors for that decision to revise the country's economic growth outlook to 0.1. It's something that the subcommittee of the governing party on economic transformation is really concerned about, and they have said that, well, as much as the energy crisis is one of the factors, but they appear to be downplaying it. They are saying there are other global factors that have contributed to that decision, and they cite the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. Yes, that may be the case, but when the IMF issued that revision, they were very clear and blunt in saying it's due to the electricity crisis. Take a listen to how the chair of the subcommittee of economic transformation of the ANC responded to that question, and that is Mamoloko Kubai.
There are multiple factors that are affecting us, both in terms of global environment. The Russia-Ukraine war continues to affect the global economic growth projections. It's not only South Africa. Yes, we have load shedding, but when you look at globally, almost there is even a fear of potential recession globally. So the impact of growth and the revision of growth targets are not only in South Africa, but globally. So all the countries are now revising. The discussion that what is happening, the de-dollarization, proposed by China has an impact on economic growth. So there's quite multiple factors that impact in terms of growth projections and also what is happening. We, yes, have an added problem, which is electricity.
Well, that's where we leave it with Siphamandla Goge. Thank you so much for updating us as reports from the ANC's NEC taking place as we speak in Boksburg, just outside of Johannesburg. I'm sure we'll be hearing more from Sipha over the coming hours.